It's a terrible experience. I feel like I'm used. Okay.
You ready?
I got it. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, Mr. Carter, your report, please.
So I'll begin with the status on the COVID-19 virus. And I'll note that the status that I've reported here has changed a little bit. It's indicated in the report as of August 6th, there were 3 new cases of the virus in the county, and a seven-day average of 2 new daily cases. And since the board's July 8th meeting, the total number of cases in the county has increased to 903 from 892. As of today, there was, I think, 3 to 6 more cases of the virus in the county. So where we're sort of at, a question for the board is what to do. The current guidance on entering county facilities is sort of an honor system, as we previously reported. You can wear a mask. We're not going to ask you if you're vaccinated or not. It's sort of at your discretion. And the board may be aware the Governor Northam last week had a news conference, and all state employees are going to be mandated to be vaccinated, or if they don't agree to do that, they'll be tested weekly. And I checked with the Center for Disease Control's website, and Nelson County is now at the highest rate of transmission. So some of the guidance from the CDC and the health department, which is still working on its guidance, is if you're in a low transmission area, then you can be more deliberate or considerate about the question of wearing masks. What we're, according to the CDC, now in a high transmission area. So I guess the question we present to the board is, should we, at my level, our county staff, reinstitute the wearing of masks in county facilities, just as an initial first step as we sort of monitor this new Delta variant of the virus, which is seemingly rapidly, cases across the country are rapidly increasing. And as I said, to date, we're pretty relaxed. People aren't wearing masks. A few people do, and it's just been an honor system because we had so much success with combating the virus. But seemingly, it's unfortunately not significant yet, but starting to see increased caseloads in the county. So rather than at the staff level just making a decision on how we're going to deal with this, I just wanted to get the board's input on what you want us to do as far as county facilities are concerned. I can take questions. We regularly monitor health department and CDC guidance. We always participate in the governor's news conferences about this.
Well, my personal experience is that I'm in a high-risk category myself. A lot of us are of an age that might put us in that category, and I'm hoping to travel to Spain in about 3 weeks, and I hope to visit my granddaughter. And of course, if I test positive, that won't happen. So, from a personal standpoint, also from a practical standpoint, I would think that requiring masks would be a good thing in categories.
And for the CDC guidance, as of today, looking at it again, is if you're in a high transmission area, which you wouldn't think that the number of cases in the county would put us in that category, but it's a color chart, and we are in the red category, which is high transmission. But their guidance, the CDC's guidance, is if you're high transmission, then they encourage the wearing of masks for vaccinated or unvaccinated individuals. So,
I'm not averse to being overruled in this, but certainly we would need to monitor it, and in the event that it would continue to rise, I would certainly be in favor.
right. I mean, to date, I'm not aware of any incidences of county staff having the virus, and I want to suggest to the board that the majority of county staff have been vaccinated, but not all county staff have been. We could just monitor it until the September meeting and see how it goes and report back. And if something, if level of the virus continue to increase, and we can certainly communicate that to the board immediately.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
an unfortunate time.
this is obviously a discussion we've had at the planning district level from a regional standpoint. And, the data is kind of in a whole bunch of different places. Obviously, it's more often than not, whether it's unvaccinated, we're starting to see vaccinated children, we're starting to see things change. I believe it would be best for us to just monitor it. I don't think we need to make any big change in the mask policy. I think it should maintain being optional. I think people who want to be safe, hey, wear a mask. I think it's completely reasonable. At some point, we're gonna have to get back to some level of normalcy, without a doubt. Of course, I'm vaccinated. I think people should get vaccinated. That's your option though. But I think the more likely event is if it does get to a more extreme level. But I've had my conversations with some VDH people. They said the governor will make a mandate.
Right.
And, in that event, I think that would probably be, I would be remiss if it was the board.
Yeah, we were curious, I think in press conference last week, if it would be something like that, but it just pertained to state employees. So I don't recommend mandating vaccinations for county employees. And we spoke with Mr. Payne about that several months ago. I think you have the authority to do so, but I think as I previously reported, we had some concerns about mandating that to county staff. But I guess if it got worse, that could be a consideration. So if the board's comfortable with just status quo for now, we'll just continue to monitor it and.
I think you ought to monitor it, but I think whenever the opportunity arises, we should encourage people to get vaccinated as fellow citizens, of people, it seems to me, with all the kinds of, data that's come in, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, if you monitor the CDC or the health department's guidance, and if you watch the news, that's front and center. Everyone should get vaccinated, but there are individuals who don't agree with that.
Yeah, but sometimes individuals need to make that point too.
Well, we've actively encouraged county staff to be vaccinated, but as I said, there are several who have chosen not to be vaccinated. So is
Status quo.
okay. The American Rescue Plan, continuing to report this, we're still sort of studying the guidance. There's another, I think, webinar tomorrow about it, which we'll participate in. Sort of the good news about it is the funding, I don't think you have to actually make final decisions if you wanted to wait that long until 2024, and then the funding would have to be fully expended by 2026. So, we'll follow up on a couple of questions we received today about uses of those funding, and hopefully sooner than later report to the board with some recommendations and more specific information on possible uses of the funding that you would want to seriously consider. But from my perspective today, at least, there's no real rush to decision making. Things will start to present themselves as, like today, the potential use for the Heritage Center, things like that. So.
I think Grace running this off, and it was an interesting read, and a lot of repetition, but it was worth reading. And the conclusion I reached from it, from having read it, is that we can pretty much do what we want to.
Yeah, it's supposed to be COVID related. The infrastructure seems a lot more clear, water, sewer, broadband, but a lot of the other categories are, you have to tie it into the COVID virus. So.
But you can do that. See, from what I read, they encourage you to do that, to be thoughtful. But I also think in terms of the purposes of the law that was passed was to encourage the economy. And I think it would be particularly important that we spend this money within the county.
Absolutely.
The money, if money's gonna be spent, it goes to county people or county services. And that would, be more helpful.
As I said, we'll try to be much more specific in the next few weeks and so a month or so.
But I think we ought to think about it. We ought to think about all of us, you and the board and the people, the community, about what's the best way to spend this money.
Yeah, I think, as I recall, we've sent the board frequently asked questions about uses of the funding, and as I mentioned, Grace, Scandy, myself, most of the county staff are monitoring. We look at this stuff all the time and participate in these webinars. It's just coming up with specific recommendations.
Thus far, the county really hasn't focused on two of the broader areas that money could go to when it's serving the hardest hit communities and families. And the other is premium pay for essential workers. And we had a couple of those things come up today, but looking more closely at those, I think would be.
Right, we definitely discussed the premium pay, but no conclusions yet. On the other, it would be probably much more difficult to administer something like that. But we can certainly look at that, of course.
One of the things that needs to be thought about too is some of the sheriff, he talked about the increased numbers of mental illness that he's having to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Social service is having to deal with this too.
Right.
And have needs too that we should consider.
No, I don't disagree. To date, Ms. Rose really hasn't come forward with any specific requests or recommendations. But we're certainly cognizant that we talk to her, of course, pretty frequently. I just haven't wanted to rush to a conclusion on these things until we're pretty clear and we see, really beneficial uses of the funding. Mr. Harvey, he's probably going to report on this. We had a meeting earlier with the local radio equipment company that we work with, not Motorola, Clear Communications, and the consideration of replacing all the existing radio equipment throughout the county could be another use of this funding. It could be very helpful because it's going to be a significant cost if the board decides to go ahead with replacing all those radios. Moving on, the Piney River wastewater system, we have completed all the initial work we set out to do on this Simcoe pump station, and I'll just remind the board, this is probably the most critical pump station in the Piney River system. It's on 56, and it's the last leg of pumping wastewater from the Piney River system over to the Sewage Authority for treatment. So everything's been addressed, but in the process, there are two recirculating pumps that are the primary pumps in the waste and the pump station. And one of those pumps has an issue that it's probably going to require replacing the pump. So we're in the process of making that decision, but everything else has been completed, and we're very happy with the restoration of the unit, so to say. The company did a really good job. The comprehensive plan, I checked with Dylan last week, and so she's still working with Thomas Jefferson PDC staff on the draft of the request for proposals to retain consultant services. That's supposed to be in this week for her review and our internal review and any comments. And then once we sort of flesh it out, it will go to the commission, local commission, and to the board for review and make sure that it meets your consent to go forward and issue that thing. As far as issue the RFP, as far as the scope of the work to be done. The general reassessment, I spoke to Mr. Eames this morning. He does plan to report to the board in September. He said they had about 2,600 properties to review. He feels confident that they were completed on time, and things are moving along well. He gave me some input. I think he'll speak to this next month, but I don't want to overstate this, but I don't think the board, that the risk assessment is going to come in a negative territory this time. So that's still to be determined, but that's the input he gave me this morning. Okay, on county initiatives, the recreation project, works in progress. We had a meeting with Timmons and Architecture Partners last week, a Zoom meeting. We're focusing on sites for the project, and that's moving along very well. And then recommended that we have like a planning charrette to include the consultants, county staff. And I reached out while I was on vacation to the athletic director at the high school. And so we've asked them to come and be part of the project team. So we'll have them part of this planning, so we can see what it would actually look like on a big scale. And then, you know, several options to go with that. We're trying to schedule that planning session for, I believe, next Thursday, depending on the availability of a couple of consultants. So that project is, you know, hasn't really taken final shape, but the site analysis is moving along pretty well.
Is that gonna be a Zoom meeting or is that gonna be in person?
I'm not sure, probably a collection of both. So if one or more of the board members want to sit in on that, I certainly welcome that.
Can you keep us informed?
Definitely.
We're looking for a recreation director, right? What are we doing?
Well, I thought about that. So I made the offer today to the gentleman's name is Jerry West. We interviewed some candidates late last week, and Ms. McGarry, Dandy, Maureen Kelly, Emily Harper, who is the former county director of Parks and Rec, who's been working for us in Claire's absence. We were the interview team, and we all were in agreement that the gentleman's name is Jerry West. He's presently working for Rockingham County as their one of their program directors. He has 11 years experience with Rockingham, extensive background in Parks and Rec, and we all were very pleased with his interview, and his references were outstanding. So he was offered the position today, and he called back and after conferring with his wife and accepted. So we plan to see him the 1st of September.
Where's he? Is he Rockingham Way?
Mhm. Yeah, we put in the advertisement, relocation to the county is highly desirable within 1 year, and we emphasize that to all the applicants who we interviewed. So to be determined, but I think the board will be very pleased once you meet Jerry and get to know him a little better. We were very well taken by his interview and his references. I think he'll be a very good fit for the county. Hopefully so. As I said, he's agreed to start the 1st of September. The business park, Timmons has been more focused on assisting architectural partners with the recreation project, so that work really hasn't gotten too far out of the gate yet, so I'll just note that to the board. The Ag Center project, I think we've now scheduled a meeting of the 2 local government committees next Friday at 10 a.m. here in the county. I did include information that Mr. Rogers, from the administrator from Amherst, sent over responding to questions. I may still have some questions about that, but one thing I would have included herein is I think it would be in the best interest of both localities if we commission what's called a preliminary architectural report. And what envision that to be is we look at the property and do an assessment of the property, sort of like we're doing for the rec center, the business park, but it also would help to plan the scope of what the project would actually entail. Because at this point, I have really no idea what facilities would be constructed, operated, etc. So the BAR would help develop the overall plan of development, so to say, what facilities would go in, what would they entail, etc. We'd put a cost estimate together for whatever's conceived, then hopefully estimates for operation of the facility. And from my perspective, that would give this board and Amherst board much more insight and information than just sort of proceeding incrementally with, for example, it's just been proposed, just buy the property and then go from there. So this would be more, I think, comprehensive and valuable information than just sort of seeing what happens.
But
So I hope the board would support when we meet next week, strong recommendation for retaining, hopefully, architecture partners. I've asked them to put a proposal together. They're our consultant. We have them under contract for 5 years to do this PAR.
but that proposal would come before the board for its approval.
We can definitely do that.
Let's definitely do that.
I think it'd be much more insightful and valuable information. The McGinnis Building, Architecture Partners is also assessing that building. The next step, they're waiting on Hurt and Profit, their structural engineer, to do some geotechnical work, which is hopefully being scheduled either later this week or next week. And there should be a fuller report on what needs to be done to the building sometime next month. The VDOT Transportation Alternatives Grant Program, we're waiting for VDOT, their decisions on whether or not our two TAP pre-applications, Gladstone Depot, Lubbock Revitalization, are going to be approved for submittal of final applications, which would be due in October. So we're just sort of waiting to see if they move forward to the next step. Redistricting, the information system staff participated in a webinar with the Census Bureau last week on this, redistricting in the county. Susan indicated there wasn't really a lot of insight from the Census Bureau yet, and seemingly we're supposed to at least receive the preliminary data sets that would enable us to work on redistricting in the county sometime later this month, and maybe final data sets at the end of September. So they've been looking at it. It's, as I reported previously, there may not be any substantive changes to the district, but that's still to be determined. And it's difficult to know if the redistricting would be used for the November election or not. Susan thinks not, but we don't know yet. Demolition of the massive mill post office building, that's been completed. I know that's something that was presented to the board. The shipment collection site, as Mr. Brown indicated earlier, VDOT has recommended about not reversing the entrance and doing some clearing on the north, I guess on the east end of the facility, and just internally, shows that we noted this last month, to flip-flop everything at that facility will probably cost tens of thousands of dollars. So hopefully clearing some vegetative growth at the east end will be satisfactory. Yeah, it would create a significant cost just to flip-flop that site the way it's configured at present. Prohibition on plastic bags for
When
packaging.
will that clearing take place?
I don't know, we've asked VDOT to do it, assuming that it's in their right of way, because it could be the property northeast of there is privately owned, but hopefully most of it is, that wouldn't have anything to do with site distances in the right of way. So we'll stay after Mr. Brown. So we did provide Mr. Reed with, and I think the board on his request for information on not necessarily prohibiting plastic bags. I think the authority, when I looked at the code more carefully, and Grace had done all the background work on this, the board has the authority to implement a 5-cent tax on all plastic bags. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, there was, that you may have misinterpreted my request. The idea is to see if there's any tools that we have that can limit the solid waste stream by somehow dealing with single-use plastics, and plastic bags being the
Yeah,
one. And I did get a call from the Commissioner of Revenue telling me that I had suggested that we do tax plastic bags, and I told her that really was not the case.
right. I don't think we said that to her. We
She wasn't
asked her-
very pleased
We
about it.
asked her for a listing of the businesses that could be impacted, which I think is in the board's package, or I have that information. But I'm misunderstood as well. I thought it was, you know, potentially that the law said you could, prohibit the use of plastic bags, but really what it does is the board enacted a local ordinance was every plastic bag that was sold, even if it's given away, it could have a nickel tax on it. So.
Okay, was there anything, maybe I should check in with David and TJPDC to see if there's other tools that are available for us to do that, whether it's, you know, the establishments charging for them, you know, to give positive reinforcement to people to bring their own bags. And
Well, that's what would happen. If, just for example, if I go to the grocery store and whoever the grocery store is, I have 6 bags of groceries that are all put in plastic bags, and you enact the ordinance, all those bags are going to be a nickel each. That's the way I read the law.
right, but like I say, that's not a positive reinforcement.
No,
That's
it's not gonna
that's
deter
not a good thing. That's
plastic.
not going to deter use. I mean, what we want to do is something that, you know, rewards people for doing the right thing and not punishes them for not.
No, I can understand.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have anything else. That's it for me, unless the board has questions.
I had a question. What were the staff reports in the packet? I did not see them.
Mine,
I had them on my desk, but I don't know if they were in the package.
They normally are emailed out, normally Amanda emails them, but.
Yeah.
um,
We'll make
we
sure
can
that
send them
if
out.
they aren't out, we'll get them out, that's for sure.
Any questions for Mr. Carter? Thank you. Board reports. I'll start with Mr. Parr.
Emergency Service Council met this past month. The Virginia Department of Health received some CARES Act funding, and they used part of their funds to buy 3 generators that are pretty big, massive size generators. And they agreed to house one of those at Wintergreen behind the fire station up there. It is a mobile unit that is available to other departments in the county as needed. So Curtis offered that up if any of the departments needs, something happens and they need a generator quickly. They have one up there that was given to them free. And it's probably a $60,000 generator that they have up there. So that was some good news. Speaking of generators, they brought up at the meeting wondering if it was possible for us to consider using a portion of our American Rescue Plan funds, the request for them in. All of the generators in the county fire stations, Tommy, you probably speak to this better than I, but they're getting near the end of their life cycle, and they were wondering if it would be a good opportunity to replace the generators at the fire station. So something for us to keep in mind when we're allocating those funds.
Some of them have already been replaced.
Yeah. But something for us to look at. And then, Tommy, you probably should speak to this, but the rescue squad, the 12-hour versus 24, they were talking about, we currently have one 24-hour
Right.
ambulance rescue squad, and
Need to
the
talk to
department is
Curtis,
asking about if
talk to
switching
Curtis
this
about
12
that
hour to
and
a 24.
see what their load is. I mean, he would be the one to answer that.
Who?
Curtis,
Well, he's the one who requested this. Part of the EMS council, if we consider.
I'm gonna be there next Tuesday.
where
Emergency services canceled.
we meet on odd months. So it'd be September. They meet every other month and it's July, and then they'll meet again in September.
Well, it's something pretty big coming up and
I mean, they might have a call meeting, but their regular
Yeah.
schedule is odd months. And then I would like to see if it would be possible. Is Katie on vacation?
They've had a death in their family, so she's off.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. I sent her an email and I figured she was out because usually she replies pretty quick. But would it be possible for me to get a 5-year history on EMS funds that the county has allocated for EMS County?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to see that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Yes, TJPDC, we've begun pretty in-depth, not paid, but trying to get some applicants for our executive director role. And we've gotten some applicants in. We're going into the interview process, so hopefully by October, we will have made a decision on who the executive director will be. Which reminds me, I need to talk to you about something at some point. And with that, broadband authority is what it is. We heard that kind of today. Regional housing stuff, I believe they're coming. RHP is going to come here in September afternoon. So we'll kind of get an update of what this new big regional housing plan that we just recently done and some of the data. I had made mention on some points, probably need to be edited, but it's a living document, so just beyond that. That's all I can think of. Water Authority, I'll leave for you.
Mr. Harvey?
Social services have recognized that both COVID and increased problems with drug abuse has really strained them to an enormous degree. I think that that's the idea that they want to make clear to the community that for many people in our county, they are in crisis, and there's more than there were before, in this last year or two. We need to recognize that. That's all, and think about ways that we can attempt to alleviate that crisis. I have no answers for you. But I think there was a sincerity in the expression of feeling that things were difficult for many people in Nelson County.
Okay. I don't have anything from the service, though.
I don't really think there's anything
I didn't
to
think-
say, yeah, so.
Yeah, so I will pass on that and move on to appointments. I think we have 2 vacancies, but nothing in front of us, right?
Nothing right now. I think Burdette said she would be forwarding an application to me for the social services board.
Hmm.
So I'll be looking for that. That's all we have for now. Nothing new.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Correspondence? Anyone have correspondence to share?
Yes, actually. CenturyLink in Schuyler. It's been kind of a disaster as of late. I would know via social media, phone calls, and all sorts of other things. Can you get Susan to outreach to them? And please ask if there's assistance that's needed. I mean, there's a lot of people who that's their only form of communication because of the lack of cell service and whatnot. So it could impact 911, incidents. I hope that's not a case. And from what I hear, I think it's back up, but if we could, outreach to them, that would be exceptional. And say the impacts of how that is in the need of an emergency. So, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and, no, I'm not done. And the railroad in Fauber, it looks like kind of got a little bit of steam from hearing back from some of the representatives. They're looking into it. We kind of went through the congressional office. So, I mean, they've been looking into it for months now on that disaster, so. Now I'm done.
Okay. Harvey? Pardon? Okay, and directives? Mr. Park?
Nope.
Mr. Harvey?
Nope.
Mr. Barton? I'd like to revisit something, if I might. Back in September and October of last year, we had numerous people show up and give some opinions on the presence of the Civil War statue outside the courthouse. And at that time, Mr. Harvey was the chair. He suggested that it was something that was on the front burner and that we would take it up when we would have more time. And I think that maybe now is the time to do that. Personally, there's three things that I've noted that have happened recently that bring this to my attention again. The first is that I've had personal discussions with many constituents about the necessity to take action on this. The second is that I went to the Nelson County Historical Society presentation in July. Roger Glass did a presentation focusing on his great-great-grandmother who lived in Afton and was in 1936 114 years old and lived through the Civil War. And it was interesting that at the time the Civil War started, the population of Nelson County wasn't too significantly different from what it is now. There were almost equal population of whites and enslaved colored people in Nelson County at the time that the Civil War started. And that was a little eye-opening to me. I had no idea that that was the case. There were over 6,238 enslaved colored people in Nelson County at that time. The presentation was wonderful, and I commend the Historical Society for doing that. The third thing that happened is that in July 8th, Judge Dorsey in Roanoke County, in a letter to the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors, stated that in its present form and in its present location, that the Civil War statue, which is almost identical to the one that we have and almost identical in location, was, quote, an impediment to the administration of justice. And that the monument's message in its present location is offensive to the appearance of judicial fairness and neutrality without inherent prejudice. There's a legal, intellectual, and moral imperative to move this statue with all deliberate speed. That hit me particularly hard because it was a perspective, again, that was an additional one that from what I'd had before or previous to that. The Virginia Board of Historic Resources in June endorsed a resolution to facilitate removal of statues. We also had numerous successes across the Commonwealth, from every corner of the Commonwealth, to have statues that have moved on and been relocated or removed. And I think it's time for us to have a discussion about that here and consider where a home for the statue that now stands outside the courthouse should be. And I wanted to open it up for discussion from anyone on the board that would like to address this.
Well, my position has not changed since the beginning, and that is, I would never vote to remove the statue.
That statue to me represents tragedy. The tragedy of men who go to war. 1/3 of the people eligible for military service in the South who are white died in that war, that Civil War. And many more in the North died too, with much greater population. Now, reasons men go to war differ, and there are always many reasons, and there's even more reasons why people try to get other people to go to war. But that war doesn't occur without slavery. There is no civil war without slavery. And slavery is based on a lie. A lie that one man is better than another man or a woman. It's lies like this that often cause many of the problems that we face. Now that war, Lincoln said that if you believe in God and you believe that God controls history, you have to believe that war was the price we paid for the existence of slavery. Now, 100 years after that, people in Nelson County, some people in Nelson County, put a statue on the front of the courthouse, the representative of democracy and freedom and equality, and all men are created equal. While that statue was put up, segregation exists, Jim Crow laws existed. Jim Crow is based on the lie of racism too, that one person is better than another person. Now, I came to Nelson County 40 years ago, and as a teacher, and the first thing I noticed as a teacher, I went into the school, into the cafeteria. I taught in New York City, I taught in Roanoke, that there wasn't a single table at the cafeteria that there weren't some white people, some black people sitting. And in this time that people get to know each other, that those young people in Nelson County weren't taught not to be racist, they learned it. They learned that all people are equal. Now, I'd like to keep the statue, and I'd like to have the statue, the inscription changed, and I would like to have us recognize the contributions that all people made to this county. Now, if we could do that, that is acceptable to me. But if we can't do that, we have to understand that that statue was put there to support segregation. And that the war that it was talking about was fought because of the existence of slavery. We have to say goodbye to that tragedy. As a nation, as a people, we have to move on. And I honestly think that although I would like something there that would more bring us together, that just leaving that statue there is no answer to our problem. That's what I think.
So
obviously, this is always a delicate conversation when we talk about race, when we talk about the Civil War, when we talk about, the impacts and how people feel. And I think in most actions, my goal is always to see what is the goal. Obviously, when we talk about Jim Crow law, that's a very sensitive topic for many people. And we've lived it and we've saw it. I didn't, but many of those in this room have and have gotten to see it and how that has impacted them. The one thing, if the objective is to take that down in a effort to basically, and please tell me if I'm not taking this right, an objective to remove a symbol of a bad thing. A symbol of a racist thing, slavery, correct?
Which is a lie.
Right, certainly. And, when we start doing that, you're gonna have this community of people who need to talk about it. I mean, if we just objectively, we as a board just took down a statue or moved it, whatever it might be, I'm concerned about, how the community reacts. I mean, my family comes from both sides of the conference. My father's family fought in the Union. My mother's family fought in the CSA. So, and both had relatives die. And that's something that brings a unique perspective, I hope. When we talk about it, like, I'm sure next month the room will be full of people and the topic's gonna get heated and it's gonna be more upsetting for different groups of people. I am concerned in how we can have this conversation and make it healthy and something that we can build on each other. If we're going to be talking about taking out the statute, if we just objectively do that, we didn't take care of the overlying problem. If racism is the topic, then hey, let's talk about it. Let's go at the heart of that. Taking it down doesn't really take the root out, of what that is. And how you can get somebody who says that's heritage, that's history, getting them to think about it that way. I mean, they might have a different kind of perspective of it. There's families here who've had dozens of people in their own name die in that war. It was a tragic war. You are absolutely right. And I had family members die in it. I've had many friends, and as a result, obviously, there's something there that is deep in a lot of people. And of course, slavery, what an intimate, terrible thing that we paid for, in bodies. And I agree with that quote that Lincoln says, my goodness, we paid for that in, I believe the number was 750,000 Americans died in that war. It was a lot. I don't think this topic should be as simple as leaving it up or tearing it down. This is a community conversation. I mean, how we do it.
I agree with you.
I
think we should use that.
And I truly believe that a rash decision by this board of taking it down would not give us good results. And we would have would be concerned about a rebuttal from the community. And at the same time,
I would much prefer something that would show that we in Nelson County, we reject the lie that the war came about some other way.
I mean, we also don't need to be the interpreters of history. And I mean, what I'm saying in this sense, yes, slavery is bad. If we had a resolution right now, absolutely. But what I am saying is that all of a sudden we don't want to be the board that's trying to, tell 14,000 different people, what reasons for what and why their family member fought in the war. I mean,
we can only
Mr. Barton, please, I want to let Mr. go through.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much wrapped up.
Okay.
No, I
And
think.
I want to let Mr. Parr speak to this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so community emphasis.
My turn. So I want to start with a quote that I have in some notes. I'm very sympathetic to what Reverend Rose had to say. This was after last year's meeting. I understand the feelings of seeing the statue, but to me, it's important that that statue is not a statue of a general. It's a statue of a soldier, and soldiers have paid prices for a long time. End quote. Does anybody know who that was? That was Skip Barton. at last year's meeting, talking about this statute being appropriate. You just had another quote a minute ago saying that statute was put there to support segregation. And I heard similar comments spewed on the news by someone last year in an interview on the courthouse steps, the same information. But do you all remember, part of this story is getting lost in how that statute came about. There was a little old lady in Shipman who had a cemetery on her property of Confederate soldiers. And over the years, that cemetery got overgrown and it was inaccessible, and she tried to get a group to come out and clean up the cemetery. And it was determined at that time that the cost of cleaning up Miss Purvis's cemetery would be so much that it wasn't worth it. So she decided to share an effort, head up an effort to collect funds to have a memorial in place. And at that time, Nelson County was one of 2 counties in the state that did not have a Confederate memorial in the county. So she raised money. I know there was a cemetery, I can't remember who it is, that did the headstones in the county back then. He gave money, Louise Payne's brother. Anyway, they all got the money together, and there was some state funding as well. That was the purpose of the memorial, was to replace the cemetery that could no longer. It joined a number of other war memorials that are on county property. Right now, this is one of several war memorials that we have on property. But I want to say my opinion is irrelevant. I was elected to represent the West District of Nelson County and not the household of David Carr. I said this last year and I'll say it again. Local governance should not be based on volume. It should be based on mass. And the monument at this courthouse, like I just said, is one of many war memorials on the property. And it does not memorialize a Confederate general or glory days gone by. It is our somber memorial to honor our local residents, both white and black, who gave the ultimate sacrifice for this county that we all hold dear. And our love of Nelson County should be what unifies us and not what divides us. Now, if we want to have a discussion about adding an additional memorial, which has been talked about at one time, to recognize other Nelsonians, I'm completely open to that discussion. But I'm not going to sit back and let this memorial be held hostage for those discussions. I feel we need to settle this matter first.
Thank you, Board. I'd like to speak to this myself. My intention on bringing this up was not to decide if the statute should be removed. My intention is to determine whether it's an appropriate place for such a monument outside the court of law. That is my intention. What that monument represents to each of us and to people, I think, is going to be very personal. But what it represents to a court of law is that it commemorates a basic injustice to the people of the country. And also, it also celebrates a war that was fought to dismantle the United States of America. There was the Union, and then there was the Confederacy. A court of law is dealing with federal laws, dealing with state laws. It is my opinion that adjacent to a court of law, there's absolutely no reason, no positive reason to have a memorial that represents the division of a country and a division of the people. And therefore, I would like to offer a directive. And my directive is that that we assess where would be an appropriate location for the monument in a way that honors its history, but in a way that does not in any way jeopardize the equal protection and the equality of people under the law, and the Pledge of Allegiance to our United States of America. So I would like to ask that the staff undertake a search. In every case where statues have been relocated, they have not, quote, been torn down. They've been relocated. Communities have looked for suitable locations for them. And many people and many institutions and many places have stepped forward and said, yes, we'll take them. In the instance of Roanoke College stepped forward and said, yes, we would love to have the monument. In our county, I do not know who would want to house and put on display and put up the monument, but I think that it would be a really good exercise for us to see where the most appropriate location would be if there is such a place. And I think that's up to the community. I think if the community thinks that our court of law is the best location for a Civil War monument, I bend to the community. But I still believe that it is not. An appropriate location for this that honors its history, I think, would be a noble effort. So I'd like to add that as a directive.
I like to add another directive, that we don't do a thing. Leave things as it is, it's been there, and it's wasting staff's time and county money to do anything other than that. If you don't like it, then let's put on a referendum. Have a referendum, let the people of the county vote. But I can tell you, I know several localities have done that, and the success to leave them there are about 80 to 20.
You know, this is a very, very sensitive thing. And it's not as simple as let's move and tear down. It's a community growing or not. I mean, some people's interpretations on one side feel some sort of way about the relatives who died. And, you know, obviously there are those who are hurt. You know, I'm very hesitant to make a decision, you know, of moving it, you know. And that's not even going to be a sensitive thing, you know. It's not going to be easy. You know, I'm open to continuing the conversation to some degree on how it is we can support those who feel bad. As Mr. Parr mentioned, adding to, I'm right there with you, you know. Add to it. Let's celebrate those who have got liberated. You know, I think that would be a huge thing to do, you know. Just making the blanket coat thing and saying that the entire community feels one particular way, you know, that's not accurate. I mean, it's definitely a very, very sensitive and going to be a difficult thing.
At this time, I am not suggesting or requesting that the statue should be removed. I'm suggesting that the staff put out to the community, perhaps the board should put out to the community, I was asking the staff to do it, for suggestions of, or for volunteer locations for such a monument, to see what the community can bring forth that would both honor this and and come up with something that might be beyond our ability to do by consensus. Because it does empower the community to come up with a solution that would not require consensus by us. And then, of course, we could decide whether that's an action we would want to take or not. But I think that is a necessary prerequisite to doing what we all have said we should do, which is to deal with this.
If I may, 2, possibly 3 times since you started your directive, Ernie, you've started a sentence with, I'm not here to talk about removing the memorial, or I don't want the memorial removed. And in the same breath, you finish that sentence with, you want to establish or have a directive for the county to discuss where it should be put. Well, you can't put something somewhere else unless it's moved. So let's not say any longer you don't want the memorial moved, because that is the purpose of your directive, is to see where it goes. It can't go somewhere if it's not moved. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse. If we get to the point where either one, we as a board have voted to move the memorial, or 2, we've put it on a referendum and the county has spoken and told us they want it moved, then that's when we need to establish a committee. And by all means, we need community input, we need stakeholders involved, and we need to take our time and discuss where the best location is for the memorial at that time. But prior to that, it's a waste of everyone's time until we've decided if moving it is the route we're going to take.
I appreciate your comments. I don't appreciate your interpretation.
Well, I don't appreciate your interpretation of what the memorial stands for to begin with. So
Well,
that's the basis of this
I think
conversation.
you're right when what you just said. What does the statute stand for? You told the story, but I've heard other stories about why that statute is where it is, that completely run counter to what you said. But what I was suggesting is that, and I think it's valuable, and it's quite possible we still might be able to do it, is we talk about, so often it's that we have, slavery was a lie. It was something that people, in order to command the labor of someone else, pushed forth, and it was accepted, and it became part of our society. Then we fought this war, and people fought in that war for all different reasons. I know that. But the war happened because of slavery. And then we moved to a period of segregation and Jim Crow that was also based on a lie, that people are somehow different than other people or better than other people. All I want us to do in this discussion, and we don't even have to do anything, is to say that we recognize that we need to move on from that. And and recognize, like Chairman said, that it's, that statue is where all men are created equal. It's in the seat of government. It sits there and came about because as human beings, we're fallible. And we lived a lie. And some people, and we all have suffered from that lie. We continue to suffer from that lie. And we just need to stay, all right, enough. We're gonna move on because we gotta do better than what we're doing. And all in our society, all I hear is it's that person's fault, it's that person's fault, and it's usually the person who's different than us. We have a chance, Nelson County, to make a statement that, all right, we recognize that that person isn't a bad person, is a good, get caught up into something. Recognize that. Say it. We see it. We know it. And we're going to move on from that. And not a people. It's not just about black folks having to look at that statue. It's about all of us moving on. You talk about the future. Well, let's move on. Let's forget it. And let's recognize that sort of thing hurt us all. It crippled us all for generations. I don't want to, I have no intention of winning any sort of argument. I don't have any intention of changing any of your minds. But what I say, I believe. I'm not trying to win any argument.
Any final comments from anybody?
I'm through.
Okay.
So, I'm still new at this game. What is the status of the directive that I gave?
It was just countered by Mr. Harvey. What are we supposed to do?
I mean, the directive is so broad brushed that I don't think you could just tell staff to go look for other locations and tell the community. I mean, by you making this statement, I'm sure the community is now going to volunteer locations. I am certain of that.
I would hope so.
I am certain of that. This is such a, this is a community discussion, and it can't just be something as simple as just us making a decision on this, because it's got to be, this is a heart thing, and it's the gut thing, and it's personal. I wouldn't suggest doing that kind of directive. If you want to, have some kind of community conversation, I don't know how that could happen.
And I think that, given, what a deep and personal issue this is with everybody involved, that there is a certain amount of discomfort with dealing with such an issue. But I also think that we are representatives of our people, and we've been put in a position to make difficult decisions, and that is our responsibility. I feel it's our responsibility to make decisions when they're difficult. I'm not going to make a motion today. I would hope that if there are if there are ideas in the community of appropriate and honorable locations for such a monument that is not where it stands currently, I would love to hear those ideas. And I know we'll be discussing this further.
This doesn't have to be emotional. It can be rational. We can be rational. I think, it's something that needs to be talked about, which is good. I'm glad we talked about it. No, it wasn't easy to talk about.
Is there any other business to come up today?
Mr. Chairman, I move we, not adjourn, continue this meeting to 7 o'clock.
Second.
Mr. Martin? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Regarding, talking about now.